Welcome to Rainier rainieravenueradio.world. We are trying to make the audio connection. Daniel, can you pull that music down a little bit, please? This is your community election connection, and today we will be talking with NAACP presidential candidate Erwin Chappel, but we're not getting the audio, although I think that we still have the visual. So we are going to try and work around this and make that audio happen for you. As part of our Community Election Connection, you are probably aware that we have hosted a number of debates, everything from the gubernatorial debate, lieutenant governor, judicial debates, congressional debates, legislative debates. We discussed issues that were referendums on the ballot, like R90. And there's another election that's taking place. It's coming up on November 21st. It is for the president of the NAACP. Now, during these times, this could prove to be a very critical position. We have three candidates. Yesterday, we heard from Carolyn Riley Payne. Today, we're going to hear from Erwin Chappel and Deontay Damper. That is probably not the right. Oh, okay. Looks like Daniel's trying to work that out. It says that an iPhone trying to go into Android. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Erwin, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Again, you're listening to rainieravenueradio.world. This is our community election connection. You know, when challenges arise, you go around them, you go above them, you go under them, sometimes you go through them, but that's what you do with challenges. And so we had a slight technology problem here, which happens, but now we've got the audio. I don't know if we still have the video too. We still have the video too. Okay. Well, then to you who are listening and those of you who are viewing, you're going to hear and see the same exact thing. We just did some pretty cool technical stuff to make this happen. Erwin, how are you?
I'm good, Tony. How are you doing?
Under the circumstances, fantastic. We are here to discuss and talk about you a little bit and share who you are with our communities. As I mentioned previously, the NAACP is an organization that historically has worked with marginalized communities to ensure that discrimination and racism were dealt with and in support of, in particular, African Americans. This legacy has been long-standing, and I tell you what. Why don't we get started, Erwin, with a little background information from your perspective on the NAACP and the role that the NAACP plays in our communities?
Okay. You want to know about my background, or you want to know about my role in NAACP? Because those are two
Yeah,
questions, I
just
believe.
we're going to start with just you sharing a little information about the role that you see the NAACP playing in our communities.
Okay. Well, as you know, the NAACP is a historic and prominent organization that has been built around the protection of citizens, and particularly people of color's civil rights. And their mission is to protect political and educational and social, rights in regards to the protection against racism and racial hatred and discrimination. So going forward, the NAACP has been prominent in legislative activism, trying to coordinate with other organizations, like grassroots organizations. So for me, going forward would be to connect and co-partner with the grassroots organizations, because it's very important that the combination of historical versus the new energy that is being displayed and I would say perpetuated from these events that we are going through is necessary. And so the historical perspective merged with the youth and energy and creativity and innovation is necessary to affect that change.
All right, and just let's share some information, some background on yourself, who you were. Are you a native Seattleite? Just a little general information, background, letting our audience know a little bit about Erwin Chappel.
Okay, yeah, I am a native son of Seattle. I grew up in the central area, better known as the CD, and so that's where I got my origins. I went to high school at O'Day High School, private school. I started off at Garfield and then made my way to O'Day. I'm an athlete, so I've been in sports all my life. I went to school, played football at Washington State University. When I got done there, I went to Microsoft and worked for Microsoft for about 8 months until my calling, which was I've worked for the past 30 years for the Seattle Fire Department. And that time is coming to an end. And so now I'm beginning to transition by my activism with the NAACP. And so therefore, I've tallied that into working with the 100 Black Men of Seattle. I'm the president and founder of that. I'm working on our racial social justice initiative team. I'm working with the city's WePAC organization. And I'm actually partnering with a lot of local pastors, Pastor Terrence Proctor at the Church by the Side of the Road, Pastor Braxton at New Beginnings. And I'm just working my way in the community, making sure that I can service whatever needs that they need and be there to advocate for them. That's what I'm doing.
All right, and the other side of this is that sometimes people have things that they do just for fun. And you talked a little bit about your sports background. What are some of the things that you enjoy doing when you just have Erwin Chappel time?
Oh, that time, especially during the pandemic, hasn't happened so much. But really what I like to do is I'm a golfer. And so I like to go out and be in the elements, looking at the aestheticness of a course and walking and talking and then just fellowshipping. Mm-hmm. So that's my passion, really. But the next thing is that I have a passion for mentoring. Um, One of the things that I felt like my purpose was to be a fisherman of men, meaning that bringing men together to accomplish goals, but also to mentor our youth. So I've done a lot of mentoring over the past 30 years in regards to young men in the Seattle area, and I continue to do that. And that's my passion, is to teach and train and lead. So those are the things that Erwin does, in his spare time.
Yeah. Again, my guest is Erwin Chappel, running for president of the Seattle King County chapter of the NAACP, providing you with an opportunity just to get to know the candidates a little bit better. Erwin, over the course of really starting on May 30th, when protests broke out in regards to George Floyd, and everyone watched a white police officer with his knee on his neck take the life out of him in 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And from that, protests sprung up all over the country, and then all over the world. But particularly here in Seattle, a series of events unfolded with our city council. A series of events unfolded with Cal Anderson Park being known as the Chaz or the Chop. Um,
Yeah.
all of those things taking place revealed some things about our city, about our leadership, about our community members. For you, what did you garner that you'd like to share with our audience about that experience, what you saw, how it impacted you, just in general, your feelings about what took place during that time?
Well, as you know, it was a pretty chaotic and hectic time. And you have to remember that working for the Seattle Fire Department, I'm a first responder. And so, therefore, during this pandemic, which has affected every facet of our life, it only served to, I would say, ignite and highlight everything that's going on. So, with that being said, I watched how it went from, um, you know, the protest and the shock and the hurt that was being felt regarding George Floyd and his family. And then as we begin to go through that whole period of time, we had the other deaths that were occurring. And we had already been fed up. We had already experienced these traumas. And it was just another thing. And one of the things I want to stress is people have to always remember the context between the context and timing of things when they're said and when they're done. And so the George Floyd sparked an awakening, not for, I think, the black community, but for the rest of the world. And so when I looked at that and I looked at how it affected everyone in this nation, and not only that, but globally, we understood that people started to see that humanity was important, that police brutality was real, and that the lack of response by local government, state government, federal government was there. And the pandemic, and not only that, but the technology allowed everybody to see it over and over again. And then, because the situation can't stop itself, it continued. Even though they had an example of what not to do, they just kept doing it. So then you get the legislation and the court system, they're all complicit. And so then you see where the attorney generals don't do what's necessary or the righteous thing to do. So my perspective was it exposed what was already there. It highlighted what was already there. So that was the impression that I got. And then I said to myself, okay, the thing about racism is it perpetuates itself. And this war is on racism. It's not about the people, because the people come and go. The people who have been affected, we know that. But the people who don't address it or don't acknowledge it, they're the ones that we have to convince that this is a war against racism. So we have to understand that this is going to be a phase thing. It's not just about now. This is about going forward too. So that's what I learned from this, Tony, is that we are in phases to get rid of racism. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take a battle, a war on many fronts, not just one. And that's why it's so good to have these young folks out here doing what they're doing, because they have the energy, they have the creativity. So that's what we need to do. We have to be collective. We have to use different methods, some old, some new, and then we have to go for it. But we have to go for it together.
My guest again is
Erwin. That's my impression of it.
My guest again is Erwin Chappel, running for president of the NAACP. This is part of our community election connection and giving you an opportunity to hear from the candidates. And again, just furthering more on that. Again, all of those things that happened during this time, one of the things that became clear, again, like you said, is that what started out as something that was originally about George Floyd, and then with the pandemic involved, and we saw a lot of these problems exacerbated in our community. What did you see? Again, if you're talking about partnerships and working together in the NAACP as a critical part, I think that people would think of anything that involves race and discrimination. Who were some of the organizations that you saw during this period of time and that you saw as, wow, this is effective? What were some of the things that weren't happening during that time? And I'm not asking you to say people who weren't involved, but during this time, what did you see that was effective? What were the groups, the organizations, the entities, the individuals that you saw as stepping up and being impactful during this period of time?
Well, I saw groups like Africatown and King County Equity Now, the young folks getting out there and collectively moving individuals to participate, because that's what you need. You need participation. And they were doing that. And they also, I didn't find this out until most recently, did a lot of data collection. And so when they do the data collection and they combine that with their participation and their activism, and they can get a historical perspective on what has worked, what hasn't worked, that creates a very powerful movement in regards to trying to deal with the system that has been set up and trying to deal with the status quo. So if we look at those individuals like that, and there was many more. I mean, my brother Dominic Davis is doing a great job at community passageways. Pastor Proctor is doing a great job over there at Church by the Side of the Road. There's a lot of unsung heroes that are working. This is not about one particular. This is about 15, 20, 30 groups that are out there on the front lines, educating people, getting their participation, moving them towards understanding how city government works. And we can see that. And the reason why I bring up Africatown is because they just had a landmark and a historical property that was turned over by the city government regarding the old fire station that I used to work at over on 23rd and Yesler. Man, that's huge. Signed a 99-year lease, and then a most revered. And this is what I talk about, old and young. Now we talk about the senior center over in Mount Baker off of 30th and King. People have been trying to get that place. They finally gave them control of that property so that our elders can go somewhere and feel cared for, loved, and they can engage with each other. So that's the kind of work that we have to do. But the other thing is just the education, the constant education of reinvesting into our communities. That's what I love about those organizations. So I'll stop there, Tony, because I know we got a certain amount of time, but that's beautiful.
My guest again is Mr. Erwin Chappel. Uh, you mentioned sports. What do you think about the Seattle Kraken? I just have to, we haven't had a hockey team, a professional hockey team. We had the Seattle Thunderbirds, and I like. What are your thoughts on the Seattle Kraken and us getting a hockey team, a major league hockey team in the city of Seattle?
Hey, Tony, I don't know if you ever been to a hockey game, but I went to my first hockey game like a little while ago, and I was impressed, and it opened my eyes to another sport that was hard hitting and fast, and um, so I welcome it. I think it's good. I think the logo or the the symbol is I'm digging that. I like that, and so um, I'm all for it. I like that. I like that it probably will bring business and stuff to the community and the city. So those things are good, and they will offer what I would call a distraction, from some of this stuff that we're dealing with. And one thing I know about sports brings all kinds of people together, where other things other than I would say the arts and music, it's one of the most enduring things that brings people together. So yeah, I think it's good.
Erwin, I've always felt like the only, but I started playing hockey when I was like 10 years old, and I was
Really?
always the only black person playing
Okay.
hockey. And so this is a major sport. The Sonics aren't here. What do you see as the role, or if there should be a role, in engaging more African Americans in this sport? Again, there's the sport of it, there's the attending it, there's the watching it, then there's also the other benefits that come by potentially bringing money to the city. This is Hockey's not something that has traditionally been followed by people who are African American or participated in. Um, how does that fit into the narrative of this will be a benefit to African Americans in the community? Should it be? And just your thoughts on that in general.
Well, seeing that we haven't had a chance to, you know, see what was going on, everybody loves a winner. So one of the things about the success of a program or franchise is that it has to be successful. So one of the things that I would think though is that if we are talking about an economic boom and we're talking about all the things that we have going on when it comes to contracts for uh, people of color, right? Because when you start talking about business and the economy, of course, we want to be in line to get our fair share, which hasn't always been the case. So when I see something like that, that means that we have to be at the table. We should be invited to the table. We should be at the table, um, but we should be on one accord with what the community wants us to do in regards to sitting at the table and what we're there for. What outcomes do we want? But we are definitely a stakeholder. And that opportunity to do that in both, I would say, outside the sport and inside the sport provides exposure, right? The exposure for our kids to experience something that they didn't or another avenue that they didn't have before. But also, hey, listen, if we start talking about coaching and executive positions within organizations, then they should reflect. Now, we know that sports and certain sports have had issues and histories regarding that, but that's something that we have to do collectively to influence that situation. Much like what's happening in the NBA, the NFL, all of them have to go through that because what we're talking about is a construct that has affected the whole fabric of our nation. And so we have to go through changing those things. And it's not going to be a quick fix. It's going to take a little bit of time because it took about 400 years to get here. I'm not saying it's going to take that long to turn it around, but I'm just telling you that it's probably not going to turn around as quickly while me and you are here. So, but I want to be an agent of change. I know you do too. And so I know there's a lot of folks out there that want to be an agent of change. And so that's what we'll be. And if this is one of the venues that we can do that, or this is one of the avenues, let's do it.
My guest again is Erwin Chappell, just giving folks an opportunity to find out a little bit more about you, Mr. Chappell, running for president of the NAACP Seattle King County chapter. And again, I talked about the Kraken and some of these other issues. We talked about the Chaz and the Chop. The NAACP has recently, which is no surprise to anybody, there have been some things that happen. And in moving forward with whatever is going on right here, right now, whether it be how do we engage ourselves in the political aspect of moving forward, how do we engage ourselves in the economic aspect of going forward, why would as running for president, what would the level of confidence you would be able to assure our community about transparency, about your presidency, about the NAACP, so that we could have confidence? If you look at the political climate going on right now, there is some confusion about what's really real. You've got quite a few folks who are saying this election is not real, and there's misinformation out there. Then you have folks saying, "Oh, well, we have a president-elect." When we get back to our own Seattle chapter, what would you say to ensure the folks who are going to be depending on the NAACP potentially for a number of different things, that there will be transparency, that things will be above board, and that it will be an agency that we can rely on?
Well, first, Tony, we'll separate between locally, and then I'll go into just a little bit about what we see nationally. As far as the NAACP of Seattle King County is concerned, Seattle King County, one of the things that we have to do is, first of all, we have to make sure that our processes internally are sound. And we cannot do that without being transparent and making sure that we are following our fiduciary responsibilities. That's the first thing, is to change that culture of, we'll only put this information out. No, what we need to do is we need to have a annual report that comes out. We need to have a strategic plan that goes forward, that monitors our progress and our outcomes. And that way, when people go back and they say, "Hey, what did you do?" And you say, "Well, here were our outcomes. How many of those did you accomplish?" "Well, here's what we accomplished." And if you're moving the organization forward, that'll be evident. If you're not, then none of those outcomes or those measurables will be available to you. So you have to provide first the culture, right? You got to change and say, "Hey, we're going to do things. We're going to operate as if we are in a glass house, so that everybody, if they want to come see," and I can't say everybody because when it comes to financials, there is some privacy issues that come along. So, but as far as a report, that should be available to our general membership. And we have those in our general membership meetings and stuff. And so I think that after I've seen what we had previously, and then most recently, and then now, we've made good strides. And so to provide that type of transparency with sound principles in regards to our finances, giving measurables in regards to what our outcomes, and letting the people know what we're working on, that's a consistent communication that we have to have with the community. And then we need to be able to come out and then share with the community on a regular basis what we are accomplishing. And that's something I think that we're doing a better job at now, but we can still be better.
Erwin, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and I was going to say, I think if you look at what's going on nationally, national things are macro, and then local things are micro. And so when that comes in the bigger picture, you see the dysfunctionalism of a culture of individuals who are in power, and power conceives nothing without demand. And so now that the people have spoken and they're demanding change, you're seeing the character of the power, the people in power. Because as I believe it was Abraham Lincoln said, "Give a man power and you'll see the character of it." So that's the thing. You're seeing the character of those individuals who had power and who abused it or didn't use it wisely. And so now it's coming out. And that's the one thing that I don't want to see happen with the Seattle-King County NAACP. I want to make sure that we are humble, that we are servant leaders, and that we are listening and in tune with our community. So that's the thing that I wanted to say about that, because we don't want to be like that. We don't want. That's an example of what not to do.
All right. And we're almost out of time here. And Erwin, I appreciate you come on and having this conversation with me. Just got a little bit of time left, but I do want to give you the opportunity for final words if there's anything quickly that you would just like to share with our audience.
Well, Tony, listen, I'm running for the president of the Seattle-King County NAACP. That's why I'm here. I'm not a political person, but I am a community activist. And I see where we need to have strong, committed leadership. And I want to step in and fill that gap. I wanted to sit back, but I can't, because we need that leadership now. We can't wait another 2 years. And I give all praise to Carolyn Riley Payne, who has been steadfast and has been solid in getting this organization to this point. So we owe her a debt of gratitude. Her knowledge and her history is immeasurable. So we thank her, but we have to go forward, and we have to be able to bridge the gap between the young and the elders so that we can move this organization forward together. And I think that I'm the perfect candidate to do that. So I'm hoping that people will vote for me.
And thank you. You brought something up that I did ask Carolyn yesterday when I talked to her. As I asked her to say something good about the other two candidates, and I appreciate you just stepping forward and doing that. And again, with the other candidate, Deontay Damper, who's about to join us. Again, what would you say positively about him as he is running for president as well?
Well, Deontay is a force. Anybody that's been around him knows that the energy that he brings to the table is max. And so Deontay is a necessary component to an organization that wants to be engaged, because he will engage. And that's the great thing about him. And I love that about him. And he has the energy. He has the good thoughts. Even when you think that you don't want any board or any organization, you don't want people that are just yes people. You want those people that will ask the tough questions, that will step up and say what isn't being said. And Deontay is that guy. And I thank God for him, because that board has needed someone to step in there and say certain things so that they can catch their attention in regards to there's a different way to think about this. So, Deontay is a force.
All right. Erwin, again, appreciate you joining me. We're going to take a short break here, and then Deontay Damper will be joining us. Again, this is part of our community election connection. I think part of what we need to do during these periods of times is when you have debates, they're often sound bites, and they're information that is again, important, but it's also a good opportunity to get to hear from the candidate in extended conversations where they can add context to their answers. We will be having a debate on Friday from 1 to 3 where we will be asking some of these critical questions and looking for answers that are also important as we move forward. We'll be back to have a conversation with and get to know Deontay Damper right after this.
November is Native American Indian Heritage Month. Please join rainieravenueradio.world to honor and celebrate the contributions in the history of our first Americans.
Atlantic Street Center has been serving the children, youth, and families of the Seattle-King County area since 1910. We partner with families and communities to raise healthy, successful children and youth through services including counseling, early learning, youth development, domestic violence, and education support for school-aged children. Committed to serving the African American community, Atlantic Street Center provides services and support for all marginalized people. Learn more more at AtlanticStreetCenter.org.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
The Washington election results are in, and here is what you had to say. For District 37, State Representative